not only low, but we're in the bottom third compared to our peers. All right. So what about the subgroups, right? These are, I just presented the overall results. Now the subgroups, we have faculty of color who are very dissatisfied. Over 90% of the areas are in the lowest third, lowest third of community colleges. The associate rank Asian, men, and underrepresented minorities are also, they also report high levels of dissatisfaction. And what's interesting here also is that white faculty report markedly much higher satisfaction than the subgroups. Less than 20% of areas for the white subgroup are in the lower third. And these results demonstrate that. The number of areas are listed here. So faculty of colors, you see 22 areas of the 24 are in the lower third. And then associates, Asian, men, and underrepresented minorities. Overall, we're at 9, but you see the subgroups really show a different picture. And as you see at the bottom is the white category. Only 4 are in the lower third. Okay? So how do our 2019 results compare to our 19 findings, right? This is this year. The college-wide comparison with 2015, 3 areas declined compared to last time. If you recall, we improved in most areas, even though we're relatively low. So tenure clarity, tenure policies, and nature of work service, these areas actually declined from last time. And 4 areas saw moderate improvement according to COACHE. They have a way of doing this. Personnel and family policies, health and retirement benefits, and these 2 governance items. And so I'm just providing you here with a list of the same areas, but looking at how many of them were lower than 2015. So overall, we have these 3 areas, but then we have variation with the groups, right? Pre-tenure have 9 areas that were lower, associates 6, female 4, and faculty of color 4. So I'm just highlighting the area that overall is lower, tenure clarity as you see here, but you see tenure clarity is also low for the other groups, right? So it's like 4. So it's a concern, a very serious concern, because it's not just an overall result, it's also across the board. And tenure policies as well. A serious concern overall and across these subgroups. And nature of work service. All right. I also added these 2 ones, senior leadership and interdisciplinary work, because even though overall they're not lower, they are lower for the subgroups. I mean, 3 subgroups here listed. Pre-tenure, associate, female. No. I'm sorry. Actually, are we? We're gonna have a discussion. We're gonna have a discussion, but if you can keep this.
Please write your question down.
Yep.
So you don't forget, please.
Right. So seniorship and interdisciplinary work are concerns as well. I would call that. So, what's the overall takeaway, good, bad, from this survey? There's an area of the survey where faculty are asked to present the 2 areas that they feel are most the strongest and weakest. So in our institution, quality of colleagues winds up being the most, most selected, 28%. Support of colleagues, geographic location, and quality of undergraduate students. These are the top strengths according to our respondents. And worst aspects, facilities, right, at 39%, compensation, teaching load, and cost of living. These are the 4 reported worst areas. All right, so that'll be it.
That's very fast.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. You're welcome.
So, you want to turn on the lights though?
Okay, here's the lights.
Morning, everyone. Everybody knows me, right? Yes? No? I wanted to pass these out. Is it okay if I don't use the mic? We do? All right. Here.
They're not gonna hear you back home.
These are, so what's being passed around are the hallmarks of successful campus models based on the COACHE results. So what COACHE did was provide a comprehensive list by area of what some of the best practices are in colleges that have, successful results. As we're looking through this, I wanted to remind you from Chris's presentation what some of the areas were where we were weakest to compare those with what some of the benchmarks are, right? So as a reminder, some of our areas of weakness are facilities and work resources, faculty leadership, governance understanding, governance purpose, senior leadership, governance, adaptability, interdisciplinary work. And the areas where we've declined from 2015 are tenure, clarity, and policies, nature, and the nature of work service, right? Okay. So with those things in mind, and I'm not going to go through all of this, there's a lot here, but I just wanted to highlight some of them for you in terms of best practices. So under nature of work, and I think that you'll see a common theme as we're going through these, which are communication, the availability of information, and recognition, right? Things that have to do with campus climate amongst the faculty and how that affects these COACHE results and what some best practices are. So under nature of work, in terms of elements of successful reporting, when we're looking at faculty research and creativity, one best practice is leadership on research support coming from the top, right? So obviously it's important for these things to be institutionalized and for the support to be coming from the top down so that way faculty feel supported in their research endeavors and what they're working on inside and outside of the classroom. It adds to it to have formal offices and programs, obviously, that support faculty research through grants, either internal or external, workshops, seminars, et cetera. In terms of teaching, when we looked at this, a lot of what came up in terms of best practices were clarity of expectations, right, throughout. You'll see this in best practices. Teaching is one of those. So expectations for teaching to be clear from the point of hire, so that when people are coming in, they know what's expected when they're in the classroom, what they're going to be evaluated on, et cetera. Grants, again, being provided for pedagogical innovation and development, recognizing excellence in teaching, making sure that when we're recruiting faculty that has a demonstrated devotion to teaching. And I think maybe Grizel can speak to the importance of this, ensuring that faculty have a say, right, in the courses that they teach and course content. I know that's something that we've talked about in COACHE in terms of some courses that we used to have before, availability of different courses, and making sure that our faculty have a say in that so that they feel, invested in what they're doing. For service, again, service should be identified as part of the institutional mission, which, I think we have that here. Expectations for service should be clear, right, from the beginning. What are the institution's expectations? And those should be in guidelines, in handbooks, easily available, right? Not just something that's you assume, but that you can go to a resource and see what the expectations are for service. And that there be course release time provided for service leadership positions, right? So people have that incentive, and also people are not just being burnt out by being asked to, serve on a million different things in addition to having to teach, to having to write, publish their research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? All of the things that are expected of faculty. So release time is important. For resources and support, some elements of success supporting are making sure that there's equity in the distribution of resources and space, right? So that everybody has availability to the same resources from the beginning, and then that can help support them in their work. written policies. So you'll see this throughout, that there be written policies which communicate to everyone and provide clarity, consistency, transparency concerning work-life balance. I think that we do have that in terms of what people's rights are for, parental support, for leave, for having to take care of family, et cetera. So we have that, but there's always that emphasis on what written policies are. Additional accommodations for childcare, lactation rooms, phased retirement options. So those are some work-life balance supports that other schools have seen as really successful benchmarks. In terms of interdisciplinary work and collaboration, I think you were going to speak to that, Grizel. So should I just go through mine and then you go through yours, or do you want to talk about it now?
No, I'll go.
And the end?
Yeah, because I'm doing a response.
Okay, perfect. So I'll leave that one for Grizel. Mentoring was really important, and it's something that we've talked a lot about in COACHE. I think you'll find that for minority groups, for women, there aren't the same mentorship opportunities that there are for other faculty that are not underrepresented minority faculty. There is this system sort of embedded where people find each other and they say, come, a senior faculty member, and we'll say, oh, this is helpful when you're going for a promotion, when you're going for tenure. Here's some successful resources. This is what the department likes to see, et cetera, right? These informal mentoring relationships. For underrepresented minorities, those relationships don't always exist. And because of that, it's really important that all expectations, everything that faculty should be working on is written down in guidelines, clearly available, so that if you don't have those mentorship relationships, you know where to go and you know what's expected of you. So some examples of that, of course, we should be ensuring mentoring for assistant and associate professors, so that should be embedded in the work that we do. There should be formal mentorship relationships, so it's not that, are you lucky enough that a senior faculty member happened to identify you or make a connection with you. There should be a formal mentorship program in place. There should be mutual benefits, obviously, for the mentor and the mentee, so that both people are invested in the relationship. Mentoring should not be a checklist of, to-dos for the mentor and then for the mentee to follow. They should be individualized to the mentee and the mentor relationship, right? So that way it's successful and it makes sense for the parties involved. Like I said, transparency is really important for women and faculty of color for the reasons that I've said. So these things should be written. The guidelines should be very clear to help the mentors and mentees. If possible, it's always helpful to have a mentor who's of a similar background, so that way they can speak to experiences that are similar to the mentee, to what they may be experiencing as they're going through the journey. Rewarding mentors through stipends or course release time, obviously, is always a good practice. And evaluating the quality of the mentoring. So it shouldn't be just, here's your mentor, go off and work together. There should be some evaluation process for that to make sure that it's going well. If it's not, to address whatever issues are coming up, right? So this should be a continual review of the quality of the mentoring relationship. For tenure and promotion, one thing that is found in successful institutions is being direct with faculty regarding promotion and tenure expectations and what writing expectations are, publication expectations, research, et cetera, right at the interview stage, so that when faculty is coming in, they know from day one what's expected of them, right? It's not a surprise or something that, sometimes you hear faculty saying, oh, for X amount of time, I never knew that this was expected of me until somebody happened to tell me, and then, whatever, and they're that much further behind in the process had they known from day one. So this is something that successful institutions find to be really important. There should be definitions of what the components are for promotion and tenure, a real outline of what collegiality means, outreach, service, and identifying how those things will be measured. And there should be some uniformity of that, right? That's something else that we've talked about, that different departments do things differently, different PMBs could do things differently, right? There should be some uniformity in the process, so that way it helps also for clarity of expectations throughout the institution. Let's see. Having year-long faculty orientations and workshops to support this process. Skip something. Hosting Q&A sessions that are environments where people feel comfortable asking questions. It's always important to be aware of, power dynamics, departmental dynamics, and that sometimes people are uncomfortable to ask questions about these things. So there should be forums available on a regular basis where people can come and ask their questions in a comfortable and a safe space. Departmental chair training, something else that we talk a lot about, right? So chairs should be trained in this process, right, of mentorship, of clarity, of expectations, of letting people know what they should be doing at each stage in their career to be working towards being promoted, receiving tenure, et cetera, right? This is something that should be embedded in chair training as they're coming in, and that should be reinforced, throughout annually or whatever, time frame is determined by the institution to make sure that chairs are always up on what's going on, not just institution-wide, but also with regards to their department and their individual faculty members, right? Chairs should know what's going on with their faculty, whether they're senior and they're in a mentor capacity, or they're more junior and they're being mentored, so that they can support that process. Sample dossiers, we thought was a great idea here in the Hallmark, so that when people are putting their CVs together, their packets together for promotion, they know what a successful packet looks like for that department, right? Something that they can aspire to as an example, as opposed to, kind of trying to figure it out as you go along and maybe having several attempts that are unsuccessful until you kind of crack whatever it is that is expected from your department. Having sample dossiers we thought was a really great idea. There should also be open door policies for younger faculty to be able to, or more junior faculty to be able to speak with their chairs and senior members of their department in a way that's comfortable. If that's just embedded in the culture of the college, then it's something that people will use. Let's see, institutional leadership. Things like this, sharing coach results, whether they're good or bad, right? If there are things that we've improved on, then those are things that should be highlighted. And if there are areas for improvement, then those are things that we should know about and talk about so that we can fix whatever it is that we need to, or change whatever it is that we need to do in our processes to change that. So there should be transparency. Consistent messaging from leadership is important about these things. Communicating priorities, having things like a chair handbook, creating opportunities for chairs to convene to discuss what best practices are in their departments, any innovations, shared struggles that they've had. There should be that collaboration between the chairs so that whatever is working for one can hopefully work for others, and vice versa. If there are any issues, people can identify that before it becomes an issue in their department. For shared governance, again, this is a common theme, developing and publishing clear guidelines for governance, having a culture of transparency about decision-making, designing governance practices that promote interactions between different stakeholders on the campus, inviting broad participation from the campus, building internal leadership capacity, celebrating results, right? All of these things are really important and things that you see at successful institutions. With departmental engagement, quality, and collegiality, one thing that they say is that it's important for chairs to pay attention, right, to collegiality issues in their department. So if things are happening, things are brewing, these are things that as a chair, you should be paying attention to, right? Not to let any issues of collegiality be, bubbling underneath the surface until they spill over. So it's important to be cognizant of that. It's also really important as a chairperson to be conscious of those who are in the minority, so that they don't end up being marginalized in your department. So it's something that chairs should also be paying attention to. There should be forums for faculty to socialize. So you see this in a couple of the best practices here, so that way there's that culture of collaboration within the department. So those opportunities should be put into place so that people can do that. I know a lot of times we're running around, right? You're teaching your classes, you're doing research, you're writing, et cetera. It's important to have those types of forums available. Being an advocate for faculty participation in activities in campus centers for teaching and learning is important. Using departmental meeting agendas as opportunities for generative thinking. So not just, we're gonna go through these 10 things, but providing the faculty opportunity in those, that one time a month to really share thoughts about what's going on. for appreciation and recognition, it's important that the college have mechanisms for ensuring that faculty contributions are being shared with leaders at the college, but also with colleagues, right? We should be acknowledging the good work that we're doing. So we should be generally just cultivating a culture of recognition on campus. That's something that's important, and that should be from the provost having relationships with the different faculty members through brown bag lunches or workshops, et cetera, right? Creating that relationship and providing opportunities to showcase faculty work. Lastly, retention and negotiation, that's the last part here, says that based on COACHE results, it's important to suggest improvements for training of chairpersons based on COACHE. So we shouldn't just be going over this and saying we're better here, we're not doing as well here, and then putting this in a drawer somewhere, and then whatever, it's gathering dust. We should actually be using these COACHE results to design different programming initiatives, trainings at the campus, from whether that's the chair, the departmental PMB. If you have a mentor program in your department, you should be looking at these things, et cetera, right? So this should be a working document, COACHE. So it's something that we should be working on between surveys, so that way, the next time we have it, we see improvements. We can hopefully see improvements in those areas. And let's see, I think that was it. So, good? Yeah, if you have any questions, just save them for the end. Thank you.
How is everyone doing? Are you still with us? Yes? Okay, good. So what I plan on doing here is kind of showing you how these results of the COACHE survey and how the hallmarks might be embodied in the people of this college, right? So we've seen all these statistics. What does that actually mean in the life of someone who lives here at BCC? And I really do mean live here, because we all work so hard. We're always here. We're always doing our service and teaching our beautiful students and attending events. So how does that feel? How do these results feel? How do they become incarnate in us? And I just want to share a little bit about my experience here at BCC. So first off, I came from another community college. I came from Queensborough Community College, where I was an assistant professor there as well. And when I was first hired, and this was a completely different administration, when I was first hired, I already had a year towards tenure. And I was told when I was hired that I had to give that year up, which is not the case. Okay? So I have worked an extra year towards tenure as compared to all of my colleagues in my department. Okay? As a woman of color, I think that that's very significant to pay attention to. Furthermore, during the time that I was putting together my materials for promotion and tenure, and I went up for promotion early and then did tenure right after, a lot of reassigned time was ignored. Reassigned time that I had coming to me through PSE CUNY. So not only was I working an extra year towards tenure, but then I wasn't being given the lesser load that PSE CUNY has fought for. Now, thankfully, I have a current chair, and our last chair that recognized this, and I am getting the reassigned time now, but I am already tenured. I've already put those materials in. I've already published my book and so forth. So I did not have, as a woman of color, as the only Black Latina in my department, I did not have the same experience as my counterparts. I was working more. I wasn't given the reassigned time that I was supposed to be given. Okay? So that said, we see what these hallmarks of a successful campus are, right? We see that we need to be very, very clear with what is expected. It needs to be equitable. We see that we need resources and support. We see that we need mentoring and that people need to be given incentives for this mentoring and so forth. All of these things require money. They all require that reassigned time for possibly the mentors too, yeah. They require a recognition of what faculty are doing. We are currently under austerity measures. If I decide, which I will, because it's just in my nature, but if I decide to go up for full professor, I, as a woman of color that came here at a certain time, will not necessarily be given the 2 steps promotion that all of my counterparts have been given. How is that equitable, right? Now, one thing that wasn't mentioned was that we are actually expected, our president is expected to report to the chancellor, our chairs are expected to report to the chancellor how we are addressing our COACHE results. So it's not just that these are things that we realize and, oh, what a shame, right? It's that we actually have to address them. Are we being given funds to address these things? Absolutely not. So again, we find ourselves in this double bind that not only are we already overworked, right? Not only are we already overworked, but we're expected to kind of capture a drop of God and make it happen right here on campus. Now, there are some practices that, again, I embody that I've seen on this campus that give me hope. And those practices are the ones that create excitement on campus. We're constantly talking about retention, and we're constantly talking about student engagement, right? Well, what I see is that the clubs based on cultural groups do those jobs with very little money right now. So what we see is a lot of student engagement when we bring speakers that are people of color that are speaking to the students' experiences. We see a lot of this in our women's center, which we're not allowed to call a center, but that's what it is. We see this when the Latino Association of Latino Faculty and Staff celebrates our faculty, okay? I love my department. I have been supported by my department, but there are tendencies. When I first came here, there were a couple of my colleagues who published books right away, and at that time, the practice was to clap for your colleagues when they published their book in a department meeting. I have not seen that since. Okay, so I don't know if that just changed overall, or if they just decided, oh, current faculty of color don't necessarily deserve that applause. I don't know. I don't think any one person decided that, but I think it's something that we need to do. So the Association of Latino Faculty and Staff had this incredible event to celebrate my book. That is going to carry me a long way in this campus, because right now that is my incentive to stay here, because I see that there are people who want my work here. But if that were not the case, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't know that this campus values my work. I just wouldn't know it, because I have not received that anywhere else. These are practices that people of color do all the time. We celebrate all the time. It's what we do. In fact, at one point, I celebrated the end of the semester in all my classes. We had little parties. And then I heard whispers. Oh, well, of course her student evaluations are so high. She gives them cake at the end of the semester. By the way, I don't bring a lick of food. The students bring it, right? That's what people of color do. And I feel that if folks here understood that that isn't minimizing the rigor, the academic rigor in our classes, right? Celebrating our cultural intelligence is not minimizing, it's actually amplifying the academic rigor in our classes. And I think that we could spread these ideas a little bit more throughout the campus. But we really do need to notice what faculty of color are doing with very little money, very little money. So I just wanted to add that Monique Gashard could not be here because she's at a conference that she needs, right? It's a women's conference and it feeds her. But her big issue was that we cannot address these suggestions to make our campus better, to make our faculty happier, to keep our valuable faculty, to keep our excellent students. We cannot address these things under austerity. So we really need to think about what we want to invest in, because ultimately we're not getting money from CUNY Central to invest in these things. So how are we going to make this happen? Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, and I just got a text from Monique that she's watching us on the live stream. So hi Monique, if you're watching. So we now we plan to have breakout groups, but obviously this is just one little group. Yeah, so this is one little group. So what we want to do now is just open up the discussion to the folks who are here. And Gisena, you want to say a few words before?
Yeah, so I won't say too much because we're not having the breakout sessions, but I just wanted to remind everyone that the topics that we're talking about and that come up in Coach are ones that, you know, can be sensitive for everyone. It doesn't matter, you know, whether you are an underrepresented minority or not, whether you're a woman or not, whether you're someone who's coming from a place of privilege, which can be anything, right? Sometimes we talk about privilege and we assume we're always talking about white privilege, but that's not the case. You know, there's able-bodied privilege, there's privilege regarding sexuality, there's privilege regarding religion, there are all kinds of privileges, right? So it's important to know where we're coming in when we're having these conversations and that we be respectful of that. That when we're speaking, we try to speak from an I experience, right? So we're not making generalizations and assumptions about people and their experiences, and also that we respect people's experiences and how they express those, right? We want to make sure that we're not gaslighting anyone. So everybody know what that, right? We know that term gaslighting. You know, you say something and then someone says, oh, well, no, there was actually this one, or I've never heard of that happening, or whatever. So that the person then starts to question themselves and their experience, and depending on the level, even their sanity, right? So we want to make sure that we're not doing that as we're speaking about these things. So it's really important that we be respectful of where everybody is coming from, and that we be cognizant of people's experiences. This should also be a safe space. People should be able to speak without fear and concern. So, you know, there shouldn't be any negativity that comes from this. Please don't try not to be defensive about anything. Sometimes we hear things and we personalize it. I don't think any of what people comment on is like a personal attack. So nobody should, and no one should view things in that way, right? It should just be the ability to talk. It's important to have awareness of power dynamics, so we know that. Sometimes it's difficult for people to say things because, you know, they're like, oh, so-and-so is in the room, et cetera, right? At the end of the day, we're all one community, and these are issues that are really important and that affect us all as a community, and especially as a Hispanic serving institution, an institution that has vast majority of minority students. In the same way that these things affect our faculty, our staff, they most definitely affect our students. So it's important that we're all coming from that place. And if anybody is upset or concerned about something, you know, you should be able to say so. So I just wanted to kind of like lay that groundwork so that everybody is comfortable and respectful of each other's thoughts and views. And with that, I guess we'll just, you know, start taking questions, reflections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, they're over here.
There's a mic over there, so yeah, you can use that as well.
Hi, thank you. I don't think it's on, but it's okay. Is it on? Can you? Oh, here we go. So I have a question about this notion of service. If I understood correctly, Chris, how does BCC rate in terms? I personally, I find service sort of murky, the articulation of it. So you're talking about, or we're talking about, service identified as part of the institutional mission, but I think on a departmental level, it's different. So I'm kind of asking all of us.
I think one thing we also need to do is, keep in mind that these are survey areas that were presented, but there are items beneath these areas that I think deserve taking a closer look at. So when we're talking about, leadership, or we're talking about service, or we're talking about governance, I think what we need to do is first identify those areas of weakness, which we have already, and then delve a little bit more deeply into those item results to get a better understanding of the nature of the results. And then, of course, maybe even do some follow-up research on the community here, like finding out about like why, just asking people about service, for example, and finding out about those problems that we are having.
Well, I'll just say for my own experience, so what I think is service is not service, and I'm probably not the only person. So where is it articulated what constitutes service? That's a global question.
Right.
Of trying to, because my understanding is, so service is part of the institutional mission, but how does that get, how does that trickle down on a department level? And is that the purview of chairs?
So the only place that you could find definitions for that would be in the guidelines for reappointment and tenure, which break down the expectations into the three categories: teaching, service, and publication and research, creative works. However, it is murky, and it comes up. It's no surprise that it comes up in our results, because along with tenure clarity, because it's all part of what we're expected to do, and yet is very elusive knowing what exactly you should do. And so we don't really have an answer for that one. Our job, the way we see it, is identifying these issues and then trying to come up with actionable things that we can do to improve them. The 2015 survey, the main takeaway from that was that faculty of color and women faculty were much more dissatisfied with their work than everyone else. It was pretty alarming for people who are not faculty of color or women. The faculty of color and women that I work with over the years on this were like, well, we're not surprised. Okay, that's usually how it works. When you're not the group that gets the discrimination, you most likely are not very aware of it. But what we did over the 4 years from 2015 to 2019 was try to work out a response to those issues. The big difference between the 2015 and 2019 survey is that this time around, CUNY is fully behind the push to institutionalize this action in response to the survey. We didn't really have that in 2015. It was the first time it was deployed in community colleges. I was freshly minted faculty council chair at the time, and there was no clear venue for where the results should go. And the faculty council kind of took it upon itself to take point on this, and created those two task force. The first was called the COACHE Task Force, which Yesenia and Monique were on, And the second was the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, which Griselle chaired, to really come up with recommendations to address that disparity.
Can I just say, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. For Monique, don't tell.
I just want to add that some of you know that the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force last academic year put into its first steps a permanent diversity committee. And this would be under the Senate. And everyone, I guess it was basically unanimous except for like 2 votes. But this, again, it goes to maybe the dissatisfaction with governance. This is something that, this committee could be addressing so many of these issues, right, if we just put it into place. And from what I understand, I think it was sort of introduced to go into where we all vote for it? The referendum, but it hasn't quite gotten there. And, I'm not a Senate member, but from what I've heard, things take a while, and I'm hearing that this committee will not necessarily be implemented until next academic year. And I really struggle with that, because if everyone voted for this, what is the delay? Why are we not immediately just papering all over the campus, please vote for this committee so that we can just get these things done? I really don't understand that, and that is going to speak to continued dissatisfaction for all of the folks that would fall under that umbrella, under the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, right? So I have a very, very hard time understanding that. I think that there are several questions.
Yeah.
Comments.
Thank you. Excuse me for 1 second, I'm not that tall. I'd like to address your question because I think that this is the definition of service is really a conversation that occurs at the departmental level, primarily between chairperson and faculty as they're progressing through tenure. And this is something that I also communicate to faculty that are going for their 3rd year pre-tenure review, which either the provost or myself has been delegated to conduct it. And it goes along with whatever, within the guidelines of tenure promotion and reappointment, as well as the format that all faculty complete in their CV. And it's categorized as a service to the department, service to the college, service to the profession. And I think that clearly it may mean different things for individuals in different departments, as that department leadership determines what will be valid participation in service. My response to, or rather the explanation that I provide to faculty in the pre-tenure review is that in the shared governance, such as participation in development of curricula, approval of curricular or educational policies by the college, participation in those college-wide committees is clearly service to the department and to the college combined. There are initiatives that are specific to departments, administrative functions and academic functions specific to the department, where departmental committees are established, where that will be a clear indication of the service to the department. Service to the profession involve participating, establishing discipline-based conferences, for example, or becoming a reviewer in a discipline-based journal. And the way that I describe these services, really, I speak to the evidence of service in these areas based on the necessity of the faculty to be known and to become known to the campus community as an effective member of that campus community. So that if you are a 1st or 2nd year faculty I think being elected to serve in one of those college-wide Senate committees is really important for you to then become, show that evidence of service. But as you progress in your academic career, aspiring to achieve a leadership position on those committees is really important to consider. Again, those are limited positions, and in a lot of instances, in large departments, there's a lot of competition for those positions because those are elected positions by the department. So I think we also need to engage chairpersons to, as mentors, allow and promote those faculty who are coming up for those for reappointment and tenure to be given those opportunities to serve. And so it's really an interplay between departmental demographics, number of faculty department available to serve with those committees, institutional initiatives that arise as ad hoc initiatives that departmental chairs should recommend those faculty to participate in. For example, as our college-wide middle state sub-study and attendant committees that addressed each of those 7 areas that we needed to evaluate and report on to prepare our self-study. So I think that certainly a lot of departmental, a lot of leadership by the department chairperson is crucial to ensure that clearly the service elements are clarified to the faculty, the opportunities and the availability of slots, so to speak, is provided to that faculty. And there's a sense by the faculty that as they're progressing in their tenure track, elements of those service opportunities have an increasing impact, both at the department, at the college, or to the profession. That's my stock answer. There were other areas, I think, in the presentation that I would like to certainly address as one of the members of the senior administration.
Right.
And clearly there's a tremendous amount of homework that falls on the leadership of Office of Academic Affairs and the general administration in total. I do share the concern that Professor Acosta had regarding the delay in implementing the Committee on Diversity under the proposed governance plan. But I think that the committee really has a large charge and a large amount of influence in implementing some of those recommendations that would be done through that body, but can be done through the COACHE Survey implementation group in coordination and consultation with senior leadership, departmental leadership, and faculty at large. So I do understand there's a limited amount of funds available for everything that we do. It's not quite a zero-sum game because there's also grants that we can apply as an institution and individually to expand our ability to do these things. But we also need to understand that some of the funding that we have available on our campus may need to be redirected to these priorities. Everything really functions as we are addressing our college priorities, and as we need to shift from one priority to another, clearly this is one that we need to address, because having such a differing view of reality or their reality between faculty of color and faculty in majority, so to speak, really has to be addressed, and has to be addressed in a way that everyone benefits. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, and I would say that that there's a lot of the work that was done by the task forces in the last 4 years, since the 2015 report. A lot of work went into this by a lot of faculty members involved, but not a lot was implemented. It's very slow progress, and I agree with our provost. It's not that we just have to say, oh well, we don't have money, we can't do it. It's not really true. It's about priorities of the institution, and part of our work till the end of the semester and in the coming semester will be to meet with the decision makers, with the council of chairs, with the administration, with the president and the provost, the other VPs, to really have these discussions about what the results mean and what we as an institution want to do. Because, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. That's really the reality. Yeah.
Hello. Just an observation. Since 2015, we've actually had new faculty seminar that's been implemented for all new faculty, as well as, and it's been a work in progress, making the CV much more transparent. So it's kind of fascinating that neither of those implementations have had any effect, and in fact, it seems to have, I don't know if there's a correlation there, but somewhat of a negative effect.
Yes, indeed.
So I don't understand what happened there, because that was supposed to help things.
Right.
So there's something going on. And then I think the recognition stuff is you know, it's unfortunate that people of color have that as more of a problem. But I find that actually, in general, there used to be a period of time where at every convocation there was a list of honors for people and things that they used to do. I mean, this was years ago, and people would stand up and be recognized, and that was very affirming. Also, this year, I have to say, a little bit annoyed because we haven't had a service recognition award for a while. It's usually held every spring, and this is my 20th year, and it's held this year on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. And I responded saying, gee, I teach from 8 to 12. It's too bad it's my 20th year. And I'm surprised they did it, you know, not doing it on a time when more people can come. And the response was, oh, we'll do it on a Friday next time. But the fact is, and this is my personal take, that it's a time when nobody can come, they can do it on the cheap, and it's a way to save money. And that's not, you know, it's very, I just found it very disrespectful, because I've been here a long time, and I love teaching here, and I love the students. And this is one, and I just need it's a little certificate and a little clap, that's it. You know, I don't need anything. So those are like little things that we can start doing a little bit better.
Definitely.
And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Farnaz?
So I guess I'm one of the two more junior, if it's okay to call you junior faculty here. So I just wanted to voice some of the concerns that I think applies to us. One is regarding the support for scholarship. So when I was hired and during the new faculty seminar, it was always communicated to us that the 3 legs of basically promotion and tenure are teaching, scholarship, and service. And it was communicated actually by the president in our new faculty seminar that they all 3 weigh equally. But that hasn't necessarily been my experience. I haven't been up myself for promotion or tenure, and it's unfortunate that I have to just hear it from the grapevine, but the focus on promotion and tenure is literally scholarship, and and that is getting more and more and more, I hear, more strict. So if that's the case, it's fine. First, I just think it has to be communicated, and second, resources have to be provided for that. And what I mean by resources could be, you know, anything that are listed in the list that Yesenia provided. But I wanted to particularly put a focus on travel grants and travel money. That is, I understand that there are some grants like faculty scholarship grant that is $500 that you can apply once a year, maybe 2, or maybe once every cycle. But then again, there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. There's money from the department, but every time I've had a conversation with the department chair, they always say, sure, apply, but I have no idea how much I will be able to allocate. And conferences are getting more and more expensive. Now, why are conferences important? Because one is we can go and present at them our work, but most importantly for collaborations and to foster collaborations. When I was hired here, in my interview with the department, I was told that keep those contacts you have with Columbia University, where I did my postdoc, because we don't have much resources here to give you, so collaborate with them. Well, how are those collaborations are going to happen? Well, I'm lucky Columbia is right here, but if my collaborators were in Arizona, the only other time or place where I can actually meet and have those kind of conversations are at conferences. And every institution, it's not the first institution I'm working at. When I was a grad student, I was at State University. After that, I did a postdoc at Columbia, then I was a visiting faculty at another institute for 1 year. Every place had a specific amount that was allocated to faculty. And I'm saying it doesn't have to be too much. As long as it's something we can count on, that we know this is the amount we have, then we can choose what we want to do with it, rather than having to constantly get a little money from here. And you know how much time it takes to fill out those forms, copy all of those receipts, get the bank statements. Like and for every little source of money you want to get, you have to do all of that in order to get that. Even as a grad student, I used to have $1,000 a year, and it was very easy to get that money. So it's just something that boosts morale and will support us in our scholarship, if that is. So that was a very specific thing. And the last thing is the culture of recognition. I'd like to also say that even at the department level, never has been a time when people say somebody has published a journal article or wrote a book, or let's just clap for them. Just announce it and clap. That just hasn't been at all the case for service, for scholarship, for nothing like that. So that is something also, again, as a junior faculty, I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and I will say that a lot of what you speak of will have to do directly with department chairs. And we will be meeting with department chairs to discuss these things, and hopefully we can move the needle in one way or another, but not to generalize, because each chair is an individual, but the group, as a group, functions in an insular way, and there's not many formal ways of giving feedback or having an open discussion about the group dynamics, about how things happen in college PMB. The three equal parts of promotion and tenure are in the guidelines. They're supposed to be three equal parts. I think one of the problems with that, and I was in a conference of governance leaders in Queensboro a couple of years ago to discuss that, and it's not just particular for BCC, this is throughout CUNY and probably universities in the nation, is that it's easy to say we're looking at your teaching, at your service, and at your scholarship equally, but quantifiably, it's so much easier to see research. Did you write a book? Did you present at a conference? Do you have creative works done? Teaching, how do we judge if you're a good teacher or not? What tools do we have? We have student evaluation, that research shows can be biased, especially against women and STEM. And anecdotally, people with accents. We don't score high either. And service. How do we measure service? Okay, I serve on committee X. They meet once a semester. They don't really do much, but I got it covered. Meantime, my friend there is chair of the faculty council, and as such sits on 5 different committees and has to run, all these things. Where's the equity there? Like, does he get more points than me? Not really. So I think the issue with the focusing on research, and this came in the UFS a couple of years ago after that conference, and a letter was sent to then interim chancellor Vida Rabinowitz about it, that the escalation of research demands on community college faculty in particular, where the bylaws of CUNY state clearly that community colleges should be focused primarily on teaching. There's been this crawl towards more and more research. And this is something that we need to address as an institution. And how do we address it? We need the members of the college PMB to first not gaslight and say it doesn't happen, number one. Number two, come together with the chair of the PMB, which is the president of the college, the provost, the other VPs who sit on the PMB, and all the department chairs have to come together, accept that there is a problem, number one, and then see what can be done about it. As Janet alluded to, there were steps taken towards clarifying things. The new guidelines were made, the CV forms were made, but as an institution, we always fail when it comes to communicating and the follow-up, sending this information along. So currently, all those guidelines are somewhere, but they're not really anywhere in particular. You can't search for them on our website yet. We're working on it, but it's not there yet, and it's been a few years. So the same as Griselle was talking about the frustration with the governance in implementing a new diversity and inclusion committee, as the chair of the Senate, that falls on my shoulders. But there's really very little we can do because of the processes that governance has to take in order to change the governance plan and take things to referendum. And then there's technical issues with making voter lists that delays the whole process. And now I myself am in doubt if we will have a referendum this semester, which we were hoping at the beginning of the semester to have. So things are difficult, that is certain, and things take a lot of time. And saying to people you have to have patience is not the correct answer. The correct answer would be to take responsibility, to, as an institution, say we have these problems, these are serious problems, and we have to do something about it. And if we fail, we get up and we try again. That would be my hope, that this is where we're going for, with this committee, with the institution, with planning now our strategic plan. That's certainly what I'm going to try to do. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I just want to mention, they also, since this is a CUNY-wide effort, one thing that was mentioned was we could look at our peers, those who are doing quite well in some of these areas, and try to learn from them. So it's not just we need to come up with a solution right here. We can actually find out from our own peers what the best thing might be to do. So, and also I think we have a good idea of where the problem areas are, but we need to get a better sense of some of the details behind those areas, and I think we even did some of that today. But going forward, also looking at the other institutions, I think that's one of our key things we need to do.
So if we want to talk about next steps, the COACHE now, unlike from 2015, the 2015 response, again, I want to reiterate, was not an organized response. It was organic. It just happened. It was floating around from committee to committee. Nobody wanted to touch it. And it just happened to be, that the faculty council took point and took charge. This time around, it's a lot more organized. It's a priority for CUNY, and it was very clearly stated to presidents and provosts across CUNY by the CUNY provost that this is a priority for CUNY, and they want to make sure that CUNY is a place people like to work in. And so they want the institution to take to pay very close attention to these results and act on it. Part of what CUNY claims was the response system-wide to the 2015 was the workload reduction. The workload reduction agreement that brought our teaching from 27 to 24 is touted by CUNY as a response to the 2015. And I see the PSC chapter chair. Yeah, so, okay. So there's an institution, you know, there's a formal thing that we may run the risk of running ourselves into, of saying we have to have a formal response, so let's make a diversity committee in Senate, and let's have a couple of town halls, and we're good, check it, we responded. So institutionally, this might be the case. There's always that risk. Unless I am fired from being co-chair of this committee, I can promise you this is not going to happen. But I believe there is will. It's definitely a big challenge. It's definitely very slow going, and there's a lot of moving parts. It will take really tremendous effort to bring everyone on board that needs to be on board, because it's not just the president has to agree, it's not just the provost has to agree. We need to convince the chairs of departments to be open to change. We need to convince the community to be open to change. We need to convince really the BCC community that if we say that the faculty of color here are dissatisfied, that it's real, because some people even have a problem with that, with just admitting that there is an issue. So the work we have ahead is I think, pretty substantial. But moving forward, just for this semester and next semester, the CUNY coach timeline directs us to give the provost and the president recommendations for actionable things by May 2020. So we will be working this semester and next semester, and by the end, we will have to submit recommendations from this team to the provost and the president of what are we doing about these things. And after that, it's on the provost and the president to try to implement those things. So in order to get to that point, we will probably have more town halls and group gatherings to try to solicit more input from hopefully a few more people. We will be meeting, as I said before, with the stakeholders and decision makers separately. And we will try to bring everybody to an understanding of what the problems are or what the priorities should be. And hopefully we could affect some change. Oh, yes, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment a little bit on I think what you have outlined as the work and the charge of the committee. I'd like to recommend as well, clearly the response and the action and activities and policies that are going to be put forward is really a collaborative effort among the faculty and administration. And I think it's important to have a discussion about not only about what are the best practices for departments to support the elements that we need to address regarding reappointment, promotion, and tenure for faculty overall, but particularly in support of faculty of color that have this sense that there's something really unclear in that process for them. And that is that not only do we need to focus on what are the best practices the department can adopt, what are the best attributes and roles and responsibilities for departmental leadership. Not only the chair, because that chair is elected, but also the departmental personnel and budget committee that makes the decisions on those actions for the faculty on tenure track. because those faculty are also elected. So I think we have to ascribe responsibility where responsibility lies. And that the chair, yes, he or she has a tremendous amount of responsibility and tremendous power in this process, but that power is given to them through elections. And the power is shared among the faculty leadership that ultimately is elected as the Departmental Personnel and Budget Committee to make those determinations. Again, and that power is given to them by election. So I think that as we frame that responsibility and what is to be done, we also need to frame it in that context, that the department at large is providing that power to those faculty. Clearly, governance plan requires a certain amount of seniority and tenure status for the faculty serving the departmental PNB, but ultimately they're elected to those roles. And so I think when elections are being conducted, I think the department has to have a serious and honest conversation about what are we electing for and who are electing to those positions. Thank you.
So I just wanted to reiterate, I think, what has been said, by Louis and Ronnie in terms of next steps for this. This is the type of thing that needs to be embedded in every single part of what we do. I always use assessment as the comparison. I remember I started working here 8 years ago now, and when I first started, assessment was not a term that I heard often, right? It was part of certain things that were done. If a department needed to get like a reaccreditation or something, right? It was mostly in the realm of the academic side of the house. As staff, it wasn't anything that we ever talked about. Now, it's every conversation that we have, at some point, it's, okay, well, how are we measuring this? What are the metrics? Well, how are we assessing what we're doing, right? That's always, always, always part of every single conversation. Diversity and inclusion and cultural competency and all these issues that we're talking about have to become the same in terms of the work that we do. It needs to be part of everything that we're working on, whether that's when we're looking at budgets, when we're looking at training, when we're looking at programming, when we're looking at initiatives, right? This has to be a driving force all the way throughout, because otherwise it just doesn't work. It can't just be the job of the CDO or the provost or the president or the chairs, or, right? This has to be everyone's responsibility and everyone's priority, especially in this type of institution where, like I said in the beginning, the vast majority of the students that we serve are students of color. They're underrepresented minorities. This should be a priority for the institution. That we're seeing these types of results for our faculty, our underrepresented minority faculty, should be concerning. And that concern should be demonstrated through action and change. So I'm happy to see that CUNY from the central level has sent like a very specific memo with deadlines and targets and things that we're supposed to be doing and stuff that we're responsible to be reporting on, because that's starting with some accountability for the colleges. That's really important to see. But again, that can just be, like Ronnie said, we can have 3 town halls. I can write a report, send it, and I can check off those boxes, and we would be fine. Hopefully it's more than that. And that, I think it's a great time because we just finished Middle States. We're looking at the strategic plan now, right? So we're in this mode of planning for the future, looking at what the next 5 years will be. I know we're doing academic master plan and all these things, right? We're in planning mode. So I think that we're in a perfect posture to really focus on this, and it's our hope that we do, and we will continue to work on that, but we definitely need buy-in from everyone. So that's really important.
Right, and speaking of the strategic plan, we are we already spoke to Dean Nancy Ritchie about tying in the coach into the strategic plan. And so the strategic plan steering committee will be meeting with the coach implementation team, and things from, we hope to feed certain certain things that they will be working on and looking into based on the results. So I guess just kind of to conclude, I wanted to give you kind of a little background on how was our response to the first coach. The first coach took place in spring 2015. It was the first time that we had it deployed in community colleges. I think senior colleges did it once before. So it was an unknown. Our participation rate was lower than this time. I think it was slightly over 50%. But the main takeaway was really this revelation to the people who were clueless that faculty of color and women faculty are much more dissatisfied with their work here at BCC than anyone else. So it took a whole year till the spring of 2016 for this to come to fall on the lap of the faculty council. It was first taking into account like the results, studying the results, figuring out this outcome took a while, and then bouncing around from committee to provost to all over, and no one knew who should really take lead. That took a while. I think in May 2016, it was actually a special meeting of the Faculty Council in May, because the Faculty Council does not meet in May. It took a special meeting of the Faculty Council to create the first task force, the COACHE task force, to bring recommendations to the body and to the Senate of how to deal with this disparity. Then throughout the fall of 2016 and the spring 2017, so now it's another year, this task force worked very diligently under the chairmanship of Ahmed Reed from history to really work with the community and try to get to the meat of the problem of why this disparity existed and what can be done about it. In the spring of 2017, that task force submitted its final report, to the Faculty Council, and that was forwarded to Senate. This is 2 years after the survey was originally taken. In the spring of 2018, a year later, the Faculty Council again creates a task force for diversity and inclusion, charged with overseeing the implementation of the original task force recommendations, because what happened between that year, it is exactly what we fear will happen again. Those recommendations came to Senate approved them, sent them around, and then it kind of died. Some things were taken on, but not in direct response, so kind of matter of fact happened. Some things in Jesenia's office did change. Some things in the PMB changed with the guidelines, but there was not this direct correlation that people could see. We're doing this because the coach said that. And so there was concern that there's not enough being done, and the Faculty Council creates this diversity and inclusion task force in the spring 2018, 3 years after the survey took place. In the fall of 2018, one semester later, that committee concludes its work. It worked remarkably fast with Grisel as its chair. Created a proposal for a permanent diversity and inclusion committee and a slew of recommendations of what should be done with the original recommendations, which spoke to a lot of the things that Jesenia spoke of, best practices. This knowledge is out there. We just need to grab onto it and implement it. And so by spring 2019, when we deploy the second time, the coach for the second time, the Senate votes in favor of creating a permanent committee on diversity and inclusion. And that then gets added to any other items that will be going to referendum and be voted by the whole faculty up or down to go downtown and change the governance plan. And that's where we are today. Waiting for that to happen. At the same time, this group is put together by the provost to make sure that the participation in this iteration of the coach is properly advertised and managed. And then once we deployed the survey in the spring, we were put back together in the fall, this semester, to see, to the implementation of what the results will say. So that's where we are today. And so for me, one of the priorities is to see what happened with the original recommendations. Those original recommendations from the task force that Jesenia was on in 2017 and the task force that Grisel was on in 2019 speak to the same issues we spoke today. Some things were already in process, but we don't know enough about. It's not advertised well. We're not aware that these changes are happening. We need to work on that. Other things kind of fell to the wayside, and we have to revive them and pursue them. Now, in general, from my analysis of the results, women faculty did better this time around. So somehow, whatever we've been doing works a little better for our women faculty, which is great. Faculty of color is still a painful issue. And like Jesenia said, in an institution that serves minority students, to have your faculty of color unhappy is unacceptable. I mean, that's really, for me, that's the bottom line. We have to work on tenure clarity and policies. This is a painful issue that came up for the pre-tenure folks who took the survey and faculty of color. So again, going back to the gaslighting, if a junior faculty comes and says that they don't understand what they need to do for tenure, telling them that we created new guidelines is not an answer. We need more outreach. We need to communicate more. We need more training. Things that we're working on need to be advertised that we're working on. People need to know that we're trying to create the guidelines to put them on the web. We're working on making it public. We're working on training for chairs. All those things will take a long time, but at least people should know that we are trying to address those things. We also have an apparent dissatisfaction with our leadership. We can't skirt the issue. It's painfully apparent in the survey. It's also painfully apparent in our in-house survey that the one that we do for faculty and staff shows the same decline in faith in leadership. So again, what do we do about it? I think first we need to admit that there's a problem, talk about it, and then work together on ways to address it. And I think the thing that came out as the worst this time around is the facilities. And everybody's nodding because, you know, with no heat or no bathroom in your building or bathroom with no toilet paper. Yes, and Colston, right. Colston was happening at the time of this survey. It's disaster after disaster. People are unhappy. And again, when people are unhappy, telling them that it'll be okay is, again, not an answer. So we really need to work. I saw our head of marketing here in the morning, and I keep mentioning, we need a marketing person. We need somebody to help us market what we are doing so that people are more aware. So because a lot of the issues with the facilities, I think, are kind of PR issues. We don't have money to fix everything. We know that. But if you tell me that this bathroom is out of order and you tell me that there'll be soap on Friday, I can, you know, bring soap on Monday. If you don't tell me anything, it becomes, again, a morale issue. So there's things that we can do as an institution. We just need to do that. The real, I mean, really, the conclusion for me here is what are we going to do as an institution about all this? And I think the solution is we need to talk. There just needs to be more talking. And I will say, as part of the organizers of this town hall, that yes, of course, I'm disappointed that the attendance is so low, but again, caution. As a leader, when you do something like this to talk to your community and the community doesn't show up, you don't turn around and say, well, they're not interested, so I don't care. No. As a leader, what you do is you make another town hall at a different time and hope they come this time. That's the burden of command, something I learned in the military. If you are the commanding officer, it's all on you. It's not that you have, command and leadership is not a privilege. It's a responsibility. And I will conclude with that.
Could I just thank you for your work, because it's a lot. Seriously, I want to thank them.
Thank the whole committee.
Yeah. Because it's a long haul and it's very important. Dr. Montenegro, I have a question for you. Who do